So, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about, about all these different aspects of traditional Asian medicine and acupuncture. And my goal here today is to just give you a taste of what's going on, okay? So the first thing I wanted to mention to you guys is a little bit about the history. And we already heard this a little bit in the plenary session, that this has been going on for a long, long time. So traditional Asian medicine and acupuncture has been practiced in China for about 2,500 years. It started off as an oral tradition and then gradually made its way into a written tradition. But you know that the Chinese language is not based like ours with 26 characters that then are put together to make words that have rather limited definitions. The Chinese language is constructed in that each character represents an idea, and all those ideas that spring from it, okay? So there's about 100,000 Chinese characters. So 100,000 individual words that look nothing like the other words that you have to memorize. And then on top of that, learning the character doesn't tell you exactly what the definition is, because the other characters around it will give you a clue about what you're talking about in that context. So the acupuncture that came to the States, and I'm not going to go over all these details in the interest of time, but the acupuncture that came to the States came first through France. So the French were doing most of the initial work and most of the initial translation. So there's a lot of layers to understanding the vocabulary of Chinese medicine and of acupuncture, because we came from this tradition of first coming through the French culture and so forth. So then the next thing, I kind of touched on this already. The next thing is the parts of traditional Asian medicine. And personally, I prefer the traditional Asian medicine as opposed to traditional Chinese medicine or traditional Oriental medicine. Oriental just being kind of offensive to some people that are from Asia, so I try to stay away from that word. And Asian for me, because it's not only Chinese, it's Korean and Japanese and so forth. So really kind of all of the Asian cultures together. That's why I prefer that term. You will hear arguments about why one is better than the other, but that's my take on it. And it's not just about acupuncture, but traditional Asian medicine has many, many different components. It's very holistic. It's very holistic. So there's a strong emphasis on diet and lifestyle modification, specifically, eat this food because it's cooling and helps with your liver qi stagnation, that sort of thing. So lots and lots of specific foods that are targeted for pathology. There's this business of cupping, and I'm just going to kind of pass this stuff out again because I'm concerned that we won't have enough time. So I want you to just see what these are like. They make them in glass, they make them in plastic and so forth. The idea behind cupping is that, normally in physiology there's only 3 ways to get things out of the body, right? You can exhale it, you can pee it out, and you can poop it out. Those are your 3 choices. You have to pick one of those. Okay? The problem is that a lot of times pathologies get beneath what we call the immune system layer. So in Chinese medicine, that term is Wei Qi. So once you get below the Wei Qi layer, things can kind of lodge there and fester. But it's not so deep that it's really in the organ systems very, very deep internally. It's kind of between those 2 layers. So cupping helps to pull things out from directly underneath the immune system. Okay? So literally what you're doing is lighting a little flame on fire and making a suction inside of the cup, placing it on the person's skin, and it makes kind of a hickey. All right? I'm telling you, it sounds weird. There is nothing better for musculoskeletal pain, people with colds, all sorts of things, where, especially if they've got a really early on cold, doing cupping will make that go away way faster than any antibiotics you could possibly prescribe. It's really phenomenal. So I'm just going to pass these around so you guys can take a look at these. Something else that's really interesting about Chinese medicine is this business of moxa. So herbs are something that not only are taken internally but can be used externally on the body. And Chinese medicine is all about balance. It's all about bringing heat where there's cold and bringing cold where there's heat, okay? So if I need to cool parts of the body, that's a little bit logistically easy, right? I just make you pull your sleeve out of your arm out of your sleeve, and already your arm is exposed to the ambient air. I can put a needle in there, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but that can pull the energy out a little bit more efficiently. But moxa is used to heat, to bring heat to particular areas of the body. And so it's an herb. There's a whole different set of types that I brought here, but they're all based on this herb, mugwort, that you make little piles of. And you put it on top of the needle or directly on the skin. And then you light the part that is not actually touching the person's skin, and it smolders, kind of like charcoal, and warms very, very gradually and gently. Okay? Also feels phenomenal. Great for all sorts of indications, great for insomnia, great for pain again, and so forth. So there's this version, which is kind of free form, and then they make it in little mini cigars that you kind of put on top of a needle. And then they also make it in things that look more like cigarettes. And you just kind of light the end of it and hover it over the person's skin. Brings a lot of heat to the area. So I'll let you guys take a look at these two. Can I hand you the rest of those? Thanks. Okay. Qigong is a practice of using mindfulness to specifically resolve medical problems. And then Tuina is a series of specialized massage techniques. Herbal medicine is another huge part of traditional Asian medicine. So this is kind of like the drugs that go with the rest of the stuff. But the idea with herbs is that you have no side effects, okay? When we prescribe medications in Western medicine, we talk about, okay, this is going to make you urinate a little bit more. The idea is to bring down your blood pressure, but we're going to do that by making you pee all the time. All right? So side effects. Or we're going to give you this pill for your cholesterol, but it may make your muscles a little bit weak. Okay? Side effects. Herbal medicine, the principle is there are no side effects. If there are side effects, then you haven't correctly regulated the person's body, and it's the practitioner's responsibility to make sure that there are no side effects. It's very, very gentle medicine, okay? So then the next thing I want to talk to you guys about a little bit is the theory of how Asian medicine is kind of designed. And I'm sure you've all seen this image of the two little fish. Most of the time it's just one little dot, you know, and then the other has a little dot. The principles here are that this is yin, the dark side is yin. And yin is sleeping and restfulness and night and the moon. But it's also things that are internal and downwardly descending and relaxing and so forth. Yang is then exactly the opposite of that. So yang is the white. And it's energy, and it's outward, and it's upward, and it's exuberant, and it's daytime, and it's activity, and so forth. But you can see here that in the swirl, once the maximum, like apex of the yin swells, then it changes into the yang. So these two things are not really opposites of the same side of a coin. It's more like rolling waves, one into the other, interchanging, and so forth. Normally, again, also you'll normally just see a little dot there of the black in the white and the white in the black. The idea there is that there's literally a seed of one in the other at all times. So no matter how excited and exuberant you are, there's always a seed of restfulness and peace, and vice versa. Okay? And what I like about this particular image is that it demonstrates that there's the seed of one is always growing and forming and exchanging one into the other. These are the symbols, the characters for yin and for yang. And so yin then is the shade on the dark side of the mountain. Whereas here we have the rays of light showing from the sun. Okay? So quite literally, shade and brightness or sunlight. The way that manifests in the physiology of the body is that the yin, the cooling, the liquid, the solid elements are the blood, okay? And by contrast, the thing that is energy and exuberant and outward and heat is qi. Now, qi is a term that, that may be a little off-putting. It's no different than ATP. All right? When we talk about a molecule of ATP, it's something that's very, 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 very tiny and very difficult to see, right? It's the same idea as prana, or the life force, and all that sort of thing in different other forms of medicine. But qi is the formation of what we eat combined with the oxygen that we breathe. Does that sound familiar? So we split glucose in half to make 2 molecules of pyruvate that then are ground up in the citric acid cycle to make, give me some love, high energy electrons, right? We don't actually make a whole lot of ATP in the citric acid cycle, but the main goal is to make high energy electrons. The high energy electrons get dumped into the electron transport chain, thanks. And if we don't have oxygen at the end of the electron transport chain, the whole system stops. So in order to make ATP, you have to have the combination of the food that you eat, the gu qi, which is a great word, combined with the zong qi, which is the oxygen, the air that you breathe that comes out of your chest that makes ATP. Same idea. They just figured this out a long time ago and without a microscope. So qi is literally the granules of rice combined with the steam that's coming off from the inside of the lid of a pot. Okay? So the air that you breathe combined with the food that you eat. So where qi doesn't flow, there's disease. And qi and blood, because we're talking about balance and we're talking about the interplay between these two components together, have to be in harmony all the time. So if the qi is not flowing, then the blood is not flowing. And they both control and regulate each other. Without the flow of qi, the blood becomes stagnant. And if the blood becomes really stagnant and hot, now we have tumors. Temperature control. Qi, because it's energy and heat, is going to be warming, and the blood, because it's yin and absence of qi and so forth, is cold. So this is more yin. It also is responsible for organ regulation. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of qi. Each one of the organs have to have their own strength of qi. So if the stomach, and the organ has to move in the right direction. So the stomach qi, for example, if it doesn't go down, and instead goes back up, then we have, dysfunctional qi, and we have reflux and heartburn and so forth. You also have balance with the body fluids and with the blood. So too much qi, too much heat, and you've literally boiled off all the fluids. And these folks end up with a red face, and the heat rises up to the top of their head, and they have migraines, and they have hypertension. Right? Because all of the energy and the heat is going in the wrong direction. Too little qi and the body becomes damp. So you guys have all had contact now with patients that you know are eating way too much sugar, and they're drinking way too much milk, and they're eating way too much cheese, and they smell kind of funny. And around their knees is kind of that cottage cheesy looking stuff. And they probably have a lot of leukorrhea. And their body type is just kind of dense and damp and so forth. This is the principle in Chinese medicine of not having enough qi, not having enough energy, and the body retains all of those fluids and they literally become damp. Further, qi is responsible for support in structural functions. So not enough qi in the perineum leads to prolapse because they don't have the energy to hold things up in the pelvis. And furthermore, qi stagnation leads to pain, and blood stagnation leads to pain as well. So both of those things kind of folding in on each other. Yes, ma'am?
Where does cerebrospinal fluid fit in the cycle of the energy? Or how do you look at it in acupuncture?
It's one of the body fluids.
So is it considered like a line? Or I'm just wondering how you're putting it together really helps me, but cerebrospinal fluid is connected to the energy, and it's because there's acupuncture meridians that go right through the spinal cord, etc. But it also really goes to CSF, goes to every single cell in the body when you start studying all that. So I'm just curious if there's something in particular.
Well, the brain and the spinal cord are considered part of marrow. Marrow. So they're linked with bone marrow, which is very, very basic, a very, very basic functional of genesis for the body. So in Chinese medicine, the kidneys are are very strongly linked with the reproductive organs and the reproductive function. And so the bone marrow and the brain marrow are also very strongly associated with those organs. And the fluid that surrounds them then is very nutritive. Okay. So then more specifically, let's talk about the different kinds of acupuncture points. And in the ancient textbooks, they talk about two different elements. One are the shu, and this is an area where the qi kind of flows through. So this is an idea of kind of a bubbling brook and creating passage between one area of the body and another. The other are these shui, and this is where the qi pools. The idea here is more of a hollow, grounded, safe place, like a root cellar or a burrow or something along those lines. So if you guys will take your hand along the lateral aspect of your biceps and run it up to where it comes just under your deltoid, there's a little hole there. And if you can kind of find it, you'll feel like you're right on top of the bone, and it's probably a little achy. Okay, it's on the lateral aspect of your biceps, right under the delt. Okay, this is an acupuncture point, and this one is one of these Shui acupuncture points. Now, if you think about this from the cadaver lab, you think about, okay, this is the place where there's lots and lots of different fascial planes interdigitating across each other. Right? This is an area where I can touch the skin, but I can very easily access deeper points. Right? The ones that are on top of muscles are more this type, the shu type points, where you're passing from one area to another. There's actually a lot of research out there right now that talks about fascia as being the biomedical equivalent to why acupuncture works. So fascia is not only that white filmy stuff on top of the chicken breast that's holding the skin onto the breast while you're trying to fry it up, but it's also the thing that links all of those compartments together. So it separates and links and connects and joins all at the same time. And because it's able to regulate the pressure inside of its individual compartment, the electrolyte balance, the water balance, and so forth, by regulating that within one compartment, it can communicate that to the next. So now, if my acupuncture needles are made of one kind of metal on the shaft and a different kind of metal on the handle, I've already set up an electrical gradient on that needle, right? Now I place that needle into one of these Shui points where I'm interdigitating between several different fascial compartments, and the ambient air is cooler than the temperature of your skin and your flesh. Now I have, again, an electrochemical gradient going through my little antenna of a needle and interacting with all of the fascial compartments that it's coming in contact with. Now say I want to warm that up and I want to reverse the direction of the electron flow, well then I add some moxa, or I add a laser, or I add a heat lamp, and I change the direction of my electron flow. So now it doesn't sound so far-fetched to talk about using a needle to fix the stomach, right? Or using something on the toe to work on the neck. Because all of those compartments are interrelated. And I'm just doing it very, very gently. Okay? So what do these acupuncture points do? Well, they transform. So they change yin into yang. They transport, they move body fluids or electrolytes or water or energy from one place to another. They regulate the individual channels and organs because each one of the channels has the name of an organ that it's attached to. So the stomach channel happens to run on the front of the body, but the small intestine channel runs up the back of the arm and across the upper part of the back. So the relationship is actually more of internal-external relationship rather than physiologic anatomy, you know, one being right on top of the other. The small intestine channel is not right here, okay? They irrigate the surrounding tissues, so they change the relationship between one compartment and another, and they connect the channel to a system as a whole. This is a concept that I want you guys to get. This is the problem with doing acupuncture research. Because what they'll say in the acupuncture trials is, well, we needled stomach 36 and it's not really known to fix insomnia, but people had a placebo effect. But the thing about acupuncture is all the points are connected to the channel. And the channels are connected to organs, and those organs are connected to each other, and the channels are connected to each other. So it's kind of like saying, well, I got on Highway 10 in LA, and now I'm all of a sudden in Arizona. That's not possible. Well, of course it is, because there are connections all along those points that go from point A to point B. You just have to know where the exchanges are. This is an example of the spleen channel. So the spleen channel starts on the toe, runs up the medial aspect of the calf and the medial aspect of the thigh, and you can see that even though the points are kind of in a straight line over here on the middle lateral aspect of the body and the chest, the channel actually interacts with the midline, okay? So the points stay here, but the channel kind of zigzags back in and out. So again, this idea of connectivity to other channels. It also then connects to the diaphragm, connects to the small intestine, connects the stomach and the spleen together, and connects to the heart. Okay? So all of the different channels have a set of organs that they link up to. They all have a particular tissue type and so forth. And the nature of the points are determined by the channel, so where they are anatomically on the body. The point category, we don't really so much have a time to go into this, but there are particular points on every single channel that are really, really good for pain or for blood in that particular channel. And then there are also these historical and empirical uses, that there are command points. So there are command points for the blood vessel, and there's a command point for the head and neck, and a command point for the face, and so forth. And so even though this doesn't really, it's not close to the face, it doesn't have anything like this on the large intestine channel, so it doesn't really have anything to do with the face, it just happens to go up to the face, and it looks like a face. So this is the command point for the face, okay? And this has just been determined over long, long periods of time of people saying, oh, well, somebody had pain under their eyes and some sinusitis, and I rubbed like this, and it got better. Think about all of you moms and dads out there, when your little child has a stomach ache, what do? You don't take them immediately to the emergency room, right? The first thing you do is you rub their belly. And you rub it in a particular orientation. Whether you know it or not, this is the way the large intestine goes. Okay? And you do that intuitively. So over time, the Chinese folks that deduced all of this were incredibly fastidious observers of nature. And they said, okay, when I push here, the sinuses open. Right? When I push on this other spot, the low back pain gets better. Hey, tell your friend that's got low back pain to rub on this spot. It makes the pain go away, and so forth. So that's how these points were deduced over time. Okay, now I want to talk really quick about how we put things together in acupuncture. And this is only one way of constructing a paradigm for choosing what points to treat, but I think this makes a lot of sense from our Western perspective. So the idea here is there are 5 different elements, and all of the elements have an organ and a color and a tissue and so forth associated with them, a time of day. So you can probably guess which organ is associated with water. The bladder. And so that's the yang organ, the more external organ, and it's paired with a yin organ that's more internal, that also has a strong association with water, and that would be the Kidneys, okay? So the kidneys and the urinary bladder together are water. And then the one that is associated with heart is fire. So running around and lots of exuberance and joy and so forth, that goes with the heart. The heart is a little strangely paired up with the small intestine, but we'll come back to that, okay? The earth is responsible for food and nourishment and so forth. So what organ would you associate with that? The stomach. Okay? Now, imagine that you lived 2,000 years ago, somebody on the battlefield just had their gut split open and they're kind of splayed there, and you look and you say, oh, there's a tube that goes from here to this pouch, and then there's this solid organ right next to it that has a lot of blood vessels that go between the side of the stomach, the lateral wall of the stomach, and the spleen. Okay? So if you're looking at this and you don't have the benefit of a microscope, you might say the spleen helps regulate digestion with the stomach. Because those gastric epiploics sure do look like there's a lot of communication going back and forth between those two organs. So the spleen and the stomach are responsible for digestion. Then the lung and the large intestine get paired up, and they are the metal. And then the wood, this idea of the liver and the gallbladder being paired up, so that now we've got the two sides of our abdomen here on either side of the fire. The idea here is that all of these generate each other in this orientation. That fire generates earth whenever it burns up, earth generates metal as it hardens, metal controls water whenever it partitions it off, water nourishes wood, and wood is able to subsist fire. Right? But there's also this business of a controlling cycle where wood controls earth and so forth around in this kind of little star shape in the middle. Now, liver is kind of like a bulldog. All right? It has to be reined in all the time or it's just going to attack everything in its path. So it's a good emotion in that it's the force that allows little tiny shoots to push up from under the earth and come out and make new life. But that exuberance can also then develop into anger and frustration if we're not able to push up through the earth and become new life. We end up holding all of that inside, and then we get really, really mad at that driver that cut us off on the road. Okay? So people that run around with a lot of unfulfilled desires and a lot of frustration and a lot of anger in their lives, their pathology tends to be that they overeat. And the taste of the spleen and stomach is sweet, so they particularly crave sweet foods. And they develop ulcers and pain in their abdomen and irritable bowel syndrome because they're angry. And then whenever they start overeating, then what happens to their kidneys? They become diabetic. And so diabetes refers to the polyuria that happens from that. So then they're peeing all the time, right? So this is one way of putting together a series of pathologies that the Chinese developed over a long, long period of time and ways of starting to treat people. Because the root of that problem then is not that you're eating too much sugar, you are, but the ultimate root of the problem is that you're mad. And we have to figure out how to make you less angry. Okay? The time of day is also a really kind of fun little game to play. And the time of day, for example, for the liver, so your patients that have insomnia, ask them what time they wake up in the middle of the night. If they have insomnia because they're sad, because they're grieving over something, because they're not getting along with their family member, and they just miss their cousin, or they just miss their brother, they will wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, guaranteed. That is the time of the lung, which is responsible, and the emotion that goes with the lung is grief. If they wake up in the middle of the night and they're mad and they're having these vivid, angry dreams because their boss is constantly yelling at them and they're dreaming about going to work the next morning, they wake up at 1 or 2 in the morning because that's the liver and gallbladder times. That's also the time, for those of you guys that haven't done your surgery rotation, that your gallbladder patients will come in the middle of the night because the migrating myoelectric complex is stimulating CCK, and so their gallstones get in the way of the gallbladder neck, and they come in at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I've got this right upper quadrant pain and I haven't eaten anything. Now, they figured this out a long time ago. Yeah?
So in the migrating what?
Myoelectric complex, MMC. It's the, like,
From the surgery?
no, it's, the body does that as a housekeeping function. That's why it's bad to eat in the night, because the body is supposed to be resting and wants to just kind of flush everything out and get you ready to have that bowel movement first thing in the morning. Okay. I have a whole bunch of literature articles. I don't want to keep you guys too terribly much longer. I've got a whole bunch of articles if you want me to show you some of the literature about acupuncture research, and we talked a little bit about the difficulties. I don't want to excuse not doing more research in acupuncture. But the premise that two people can be treated the same way is completely antithetical to the way that acupuncture is structured. Okay, I'm not trying to be cavalier, but really and truly, you can't take two people that have hypertension and say that it's coming from exactly the same etiology. And acupuncture treats hypertension and diabetes and insomnia and I wrote down a list of things, and depression and migraines. This Western medicine treats all of these things individually and differently, right? We would give a different pain or a different pill for each one of those things. Acupuncture says, okay, these are all the symptoms of the underlying cause. So I'm going to treat this stuff up here, but I'm also going to fix this root problem down here. So you can't, just like fingerprints, you can't say that these two patients are the same and I can give them the same point prescription. So this is just a hurdle that we really need to overcome in the acupuncture community about how can we compare apples and oranges. Okay, the same sort of thing with herbal prescriptions. Very, very tricky. So I'm just going to have to skip this part in the interest of getting you guys into another lecture here. And then the last thing I just wanted to tell you is what your acupuncture colleagues go through to become acupuncturists. All right? So acupuncture training is a master's level program. It's supposed to be 4 years. It usually ends up being longer than that because the training is very, very rigorous. It's like medical school, except they have to cram medical school and residency into 4 years. Okay, so it usually ends up being more like 5 or 6 because these students are also working most of the time full-time and supporting themselves at the same time. So it's a master's degree, there's classroom and clinical training. Their boards are the same as their licensing exam, so after they finish their training, they take their boards. It would be like our USMLE, and then we have boards on top of that, but they stop at that point. They stop after their licensing exam. They do have to maintain continuing education units and so forth, and they can do acupuncture-only master's degrees or ones that are TCM, TOM, like that kind of thing together. There are also doctorate programs that are specialized, and it's usually 1 to 2 years of training with a clinical component and research and so forth. And here is a long list of things for more information. You guys all have that in your handouts too. So these are some journals that I recommend that I think are very, very helpful. NEJM happens to have a lot of CAM research in it, JAMA not so much. But the American Journal of Medical Acupuncture, Journal of Complementary and Alternative Medicine, and then there's an evidence-based complementary and alternative medicine. Here are some good places to go whenever you're trying to find information. And like I signed up for Medline Plus to have a series of emails sent to me every day that keeps me updated on CAM topics. References. You guys, I'm sure, all have access through your university libraries to Natural Standard. And Natural Standard is a database of every kind of CAM practitioner and herb under the sun. So you can look it up and find out, well, what is Reiki and what's the training like and what's it good for and what does the research show and all that sort of thing. And these are a couple of books that I recommend. Lastly, to find out more about training for physicians, just go to the American Board of Medical Acupuncture. It has the complete list of training programs in the United States, what the requirements are. Can you do it as a med student? Do you have to wait until you're a resident or an attending, and so forth and so on. But I would really recommend you go to acupuncture school, because you won't have to, in most states, you won't have to finish, you won't have to jump through quite as many hoops, but you will understand the medicine so much better. It won't be, if there's pain here, needle here, kind of memorization, but you'll really be able to understand the way that this whole system is put together. So, thanks so much for your time. I will be out at 2 o'clock this afternoon at the Ilum desk, so if anybody wants to talk to me and ask questions, we can kind of do that out there. Yeah?
Several years ago, the Illinois statute of acupuncture allowed all physicians, dentists, and osteopaths to conduct acupuncture practices as a general law. Has that changed at all in Illinois?
To my knowledge, that has not changed in Illinois. Yes. It's not right.
Any education, the dentist,
Yeah.
physician, and osteopath conduct
Right.
acupuncture practice.
Yes, yes. So just bear that in mind. When you're sending your patients for acupuncture, know that physicians can hang out a shingle and say that they are acupuncturists with minimal or no training. So know what kind of training they had in order to say that they're doing acupuncture. Thank you all so much for your attention. I really appreciate it.